So, welcome to my presentation about the MBS Xojo plugins. My name is Christian Schmitz, and I'm the CEO of MonkeyBread Software. So, we have currently about 48 plugins in our complete package, or about 50 plugins in total. We got around 500 plugin parts. So every plugin is composed of several smaller parts. We have about 80,000 items in the documentation, including 3,000 classes and over 2,000 example projects. So if you have nothing to do in your vacation, you could probably get 100 done per day to look through and see what's inside. Basically, for the last years, the numbers stayed around this because we are removing old things and adding new things, so the numbers stay about the same. And over the years, I had to adjust a lot of things for new Xojo versions. For example, I had to rewrite WebKit support for the HTML viewer using WebKit 2. We recently, in 2020, we got a newer plugin SDK with support for Apple Silicon. We also had to adapt to the desktop controls with 29 controls in the MBS plugin and over 100 methods extending existing Xojo controls. So I had to duplicate a lot of code. And then Xojo, from time to time, changes the version of Chromium they use for Windows to give you a nicer browser experience. And every time I have to look up which version they use. So I have to download that version, get the header files, and recompile my plugin part for it. Then I added support for Windows on ARM for 2022 R2. And for R4, I added the Linux 64-bit parts in the plugin, so the plugin can be used on all the different platforms. But not all plugin parts actually work on all the platforms. But at least you don't get an error that the plugin is not supported for a platform. So I don't want to talk about all the things that we have made over 20 years. So let's just talk about what changed in the last year or two. And if you like, you can see the older video on the website. So let's start with Fidgets. Fidgets are little devices with an USB connection from a company called Fidgets. And you can find a lot of devices from them and use them with your projects. We got a new set of classes for them for the newer API 2.2. We had the older API covered with older classes, which are still there if you have old projects. But the newer API does a lot of things differently, especially more asynchronous. So you set a value and you get a callback when it's finished. You can get a lot of sensors, like for humidity or magnetic light, gyroscope, and so on. So you can build your own thing, like a weather station. You have analog and digital input-output, so you can write some code on your Xojo app to switch output and then trigger maybe a garage door, if you like. Everything works on macOS, Windows, and Linux. And I think it's a great thing to build your own thing, like automate something. They also have motors, so you can actually move something if you want, and displays. Now then we got the idea to have a code editor in Xojo for use in various projects, especially to show source code in Xojo. And we adapted the Scintilla library for that, which gives us an advanced text editor for desktop projects. It brings syntax highlighting for over 100 languages. And I wrote a syntax highlighter in C for Xojo. So you get all the if, then, all the keywords highlighted, and it recognizes the loops and if branches. It can do code folding, so you can fold code if you need. Yeah, it has auto-completion, and if you have functions taking parameters, you can do the call tips, which show you then what parameters you need. So if you ever need to write your own IDE for Xojo script, you can use this control. You can show error indicators, so you can show where an error is happening. There are different styles available for different things in the syntax. So like you can have keywords in a different color than normal text or numbers. And you can show little signs for bookmarks or for breakpoints. Over the time, I edited things like find and replace. So we can show a find window and then do a search and replace, and even with regular expressions. We added copy and paste context menus, so you can decide whether you use a standard menu or use your own. Everything is available for macOS, Windows, and Linux, so you can use the control cross-platform. And for the next version, I'm adding new methods for printing. So you can either have a print preview by drawing into a picture, or actually draw in a printer context and get it on paper. Here are a few screenshots where we show you the control showing Xojo code, HTML, and some SQL statements. So if your app needs anything like this, or maybe CSS or PHP or whatever, you can show it in your application, allow the user to edit it, and, well, have a nice editor. Then, for over 10 years, I'm using DynaPDF to get more PDF features into Xojo projects. And recently, we got PDF UA1 support. So you may know that there are different PDF standards, different PDF versions. And one of the recent additions is the user accessible version, where you get tags in the PDF to highlight what is what in the text for screen readers. Like you may provide alternative text for pictures, as well as mark what's a paragraph, what's a heading, like HTML. You can do that now with DynaPDF. We also got our support for invoices based off an XML embedded in the PDF updated. So in Germany, that's Zugpferd standard, and in France, it's Factor X. We got complex text layouts on Windows. So on Windows, we can do a little bit more for text rendering than on other platforms by using Microsoft's code to do font substitution. So if you have a character in a font which is not included in the current font, we can fall back on different fonts. So you can provide an alternative font list. This is supposed to come to Mac and Linux eventually, but I'm not sure how soon. And also we got object compression, which makes all the PDFs a little bit smaller by compressing more parts of the PDF file. To query the version of a PDF, there's a new version class, which not just tells you the PDF version, but also the add-ons, like is it a PDF A, is it a PDF X, with what features. Like, for example, if you have a PDF A with the UA support, you can see that in the version details. And we have a function to convert style text from Xojo's style text class to DynaPDF. And this one got improved to allow you to specify the distance between two lines with a leading factor, so you can have, well, bigger distances between your lines. That's a simple thing, but we didn't have it. So then we have iOS. Over the time, I got quite a few controls for iOS. Like here we have the one for 3D graphics, for maps, and a web viewer. So if you need, well, 3D graphics to show a little animation maybe, you need to show a map with maybe a way for the customer to drive, or some dots on the map where some things are. Or you need an HTML viewer with a few more options, you can use our controls. We also got functions for iOS for style text, and we have a few sharing, a few ways to share documents, text, style text with the user. So you can, for example, have a button to send a style text as an email. Then I added document pickers. So you can, for example, use UI document picker to have the user get a load or save box and just load files or save files. And we have a contact picker, as you see there, where you can pick an address from the contacts list without having the permissions to read the whole address book. So you just show the picker and pick something. And then we got a progress dialog for iOS, which looks like this. So it's an overlay over your current screen. It can show progress as a bar or as a circle. And there's an indeterminate state where you, well, see it just moving. And if you need to show progress for a longer taking operation, this is a fantastic way to do that. Then we got document scanning, where you would use the camera of the iPhone to scan a piece of paper on your desk, and then get a picture from that, or a PDF document. And yeah, it rectifies the picture, so it looks correct, and people like this to, well, scan paper with the iPhone. Yeah, you probably all have seen that. So then for iOS, I got support for Google AdMob. So the plugin wraps the SDK from Google to allow you to show ads on your iOS app and earn some money with it. You have to sign up with Google to get access and get your keys for that. And then you have to define the area in your app where to show an ad. And there are three possibilities. One is a banner ad, so this little banner on the bottom or top of your screen, which everyone tries to ignore. Then there is there's another ad between two things. So when you, for example, finished a level in a game and you move to the next level, you can show this intermediate ad. And then you can define a reward ad, so the user gets some benefit in your app, like some extra points, some extra coins, if they actually watch the ad. So you can award the user. And we have a lot of events for that, so you can see whether the user actually watched it to the end and should get the reward, or if they canceled early because they don't have time. So if you have a need to read and write Excel documents, we have a little partnership with the people from the libXL company for over 10 years now. They provide a library to read and write Excel documents in the older format and the newer format, also the format with macros if you need. And we can do a lot of things there, like read and write cells, create new sheets, define formats and styles. We got support for autofilter, so you can export maybe 1,000 records, but then put in a filter so the user, when they open the documents, they see only the data for their own country until they choose a different country. So you can apply a filter. We also got a class for the form controls. So an Excel document can have, well, form controls like buttons, checkboxes, combo boxes, text fields. And you can work with them and query where they are, change the color, the text, the position, a lot of things. Then we have OCR support with the Tesseract engine, and we updated this to the version 5 recently. So you can use Tesseract to do your OCR work and recognize text on pictures. The version 5 is better in recognition and has more languages, so there are now over 100 languages possible. Yeah, and it gives you a better quality because they added more things to train it better. And this is an open source library, so there's no royalty to pay, and you can just use it. Then we have several classes for barcodes. And the latest addition there was to allow you to load the setbar library. And that's a cross-platform usable library to recognize barcodes in different formats. For example, EAN codes or QR codes. And it can find several barcodes on a picture. So you could take a picture with several products and then have them all recognize the barcodes. And you can combine this with our classes to use the camera on a Mac, Windows, or iPhone if you need to scan barcodes. Then we have an example, which I think is still interesting. It's a list of containers. And I made this example to show a few customers how to have a list of containers and smooth scroll them, at least on macOS. Because there we can use a plugin-based scroll view and move it in between the containers. So we get this smooth scrolling. The example also works on Windows, but of course not as nicely. And it uses the NS scroll view on Mac. Then we have a class for text finder on macOS. That's a standard user interface element from Apple. So you can just have a text area in your application on a Mac, and then you could have a context menu or a menu command to show the find panel. Here, this little bar to find and maybe also do replace. And you can programmatically show it, hide it, jump to the next entry if you like it. And it's a nice thing to get a standard user interface on Mac. And it's, of course, localized by Apple for all the languages. Then if you have some more needs for shards, more than what's built into Xojo, we got a shard director, a big sharding engine with over 29 shard types, full Unicode support, royalty-free licenses, over 200 example projects. And with version 7, last year we added tree map shards and heat map shards. And also we got multi-page PDF output, so you can render several shards into a PDF document. There's newer code to do high DPI. So you can say, I want this shard rendered with 2 times or 3 times, 4 times the number of pixels, so I get it printed nicely. Then there's new code for projections. So in this shard, you see there is a texture on the bottom, and then it's projected on the actual shard above it. And the output for this surface shards is now a vector graphic for either PDF or SVG. So you can output all the shards as both PDF and SVG in vector graphics. And for the older version, it used to be a bitmap, but now it's also vector. So here are 2 examples for the discrete heat map and for the tree map shards, the latest addition to Shard Director. And then I like to show you the example we made for real-time shard drawing. So this is an example where you have 2 controls. One is for showing the shard, and the other is showing this overview graph. And you can move in both if you like. The mouse, the top control shows you where you are with this little controls moving with the shard. And you can scroll up and down as you need. Then I implemented the collection view control for macOS. This is the control Apple uses for their Photos application. So it can show you easily 1 million items. They are created on demand, and we use Xojo's containers for the items. So every item is a container. They get created as needed. They may get reused if needed. The layout is dynamically, so you can resize the thing and they reorder. And it looks nice, but it's only for macOS currently, so we'll see if Xojo has something for Windows soon with their new XAML controls. Then we have the data detector class. This is code from Apple to recognize items in text, and it's used both in Apple Mail and iMessage, so you can click on things. Like if you have an address there and it detects that this is an address, you can click on it and then it allows you to add it as a contact. So you can find phone numbers, URLs, emails, flight numbers, and postal addresses in text. And it can be very useful, but it requires that you run it on Mac or iOS. Then, over 10 years ago, I also started a SQL plugin, and it supports currently 15 different targets. So if you have a need to connect to an old Firebird database, or you need a newer MySQL database, or MariaDB, Postgres, whatever, you can connect to it with our native classes, the SQL connection, or with our database subclass, the SQL database class. This is an alternative to the built-in 6 in Xojo, and we have a few more options for you. And for example, you can do blob streaming, so you don't have to load a big image file into memory, but you can directly stream it from disk to the database for an insert. Or when you receive it, you can download it also as a stream. Then you can connect to SQL Server, not just from Windows, but also from Mac or Linux using the free TDI library. The plugin can do SQL queries with multi-threading. So if you have a query which takes long, you can do it in a background thread. And we do bulk transfers. So if you query a lot of small records, we can download them in batches of 100, for example, and speed up the network transfer a lot. Then we got edit and update methods for the SQL database MBS class finally to work, for those who don't want to write their own SQL statements. I added the support for the row set class, since Xojo introduced that some time ago. And for the built-in SQLite library in the plugin, we enabled several extensions, like the one for math functions, for geocoordinates, and for Unicode. So if you use the built-in SQLite database library in the plugin, you benefit from them. And also we got some nice functions to dump parts of your database into a text file. That's just like the SQLite command line utility, where you can export a table as SQL statements. Then we had the request to support RabbitMQ. This is an open source library for message queues, and you can use our plugin to connect to such a server, list what's available, listen for messages, and also send messages. And this works cross-platform and allows you to integrate your Xojo application with such a server and exchange messages. Then we have bigger numbers. So a normal double may not be enough for you sometimes, so we got a big number class with 320 bits and about 70 digits on precision. So you can do all your math calculations as needed. And because some clients complain that it's not enough for them, I decided to make a bigger number. And this one got 2,000 bits, 600 digits. Should be enough. And then people say, oh, we want to do integer math. OK, so we got a large number with a 4,000-bit number. All these number classes are optimized. So if you have smaller numbers, they, of course, use less bits and don't calculate all the zeros on the front. Can be useful. Then we have some things for Windows. Some time ago, I upgraded my build environment to Visual Studio 2019, which then also means that we require for some plugins the newer runtime libraries. We got a spell checking class for Windows. We also have one for Mac, of course. But on Windows, you can now use a system spell checker to do look up if a word is correct. We also got a class to report errors for the error database on Windows. So there's, if you have a Windows server, you probably know that FileMaker has an error log there for all your events happening on the server. And you can add your own entry there with our error reporting class. Then if you use the direct show classes for connecting to a camera on your Windows PC, You can now use the pin class to pick individual inputs like this camera, but I want the left microphone or the right one. So if you need that, we have that. We also got thread pooling for Windows. We also have that for Mac. So if you run a threaded function as a plugin, we can reuse the threads. And there is a class to control the minimum, maximum number of threads. So we can reuse threads, which makes things a little bit faster. Then I got a class, we got a control for WebView 2. This is a control made by Microsoft for a modern browser engine. It's using Chromium, the version Microsoft uses for Edge. And you can use it as a control in Xojo to do various things, like loading a website, showing it, and maybe not getting an alert that you use Internet Explorer or whatever. You can run JavaScript, so you can just say execute JavaScript. There are events for Xojo where you can be notified if your JavaScript execution is finished, if you should open a new window, or if your navigation finished or the printing finished. We recently added classes for cookie management to the plugin. We have methods for cut, copy, paste if you want to automate something. And with the cookie classes, you can query which cookies are set by a website, and then, for example, use the same cookies to download something using curl, and then pass through the cookies so you are logged in. That's something we need from time to time. Then we still have functions for events and contacts databases on macOS. Also for iOS, of course. There were a few recent additions about having the birthday and the location for an event. Also connecting contacts to events and location. And the change history event class allows you to query what changed in the context database since the last time your application ran. Then we have a few classes for working with Word files. So you don't need to have Microsoft Word installed, but you can still load and save Word documents and make changes with our plugin. Especially we started with finding and replacing tags, so we had little placeholders to replace with the actual values. But newer plugins have a contains function to check if a certain text appears on a Word document, and then a substitute function to replace this text. So we can replace any text visible in a Word document. Then we have a couple of useful utility functions, like there's a string handle, which allows you to concat a lot of text quickly without copying all the text for every new text. We got one-line functions to read files and write files, so you don't need to use a binary stream class for that. We got a little helper function for the memory block to find some bytes inside the memory block, like find the next null byte or so. Then we got our declare callback function, declare callback class to be thread safe cross-platform. So with the plugin, we have our own classes to do declares. So you can load a library, you can look up a function, you can call the function, and then you can also provide a callback where you get called when something is finished. And this class got thread safe a few months ago, and so you can use it to get a callback and not have your app crash when it's getting a callback, calling a Xojo method. And then we have compression with set standard. So that's a newer compression algorithm, and some people needed that. And finally, after more than 20 years of waiting, I made a serial port class. Yeah, some people were not satisfied with a built-in one, and so we made my own with a few more options, and customers were happy. If you use our taglib classes to work with MP3 tags or MP4 tags, you can now also create the cover art. Then we have a few more Mac features. So first, we got more barcode types since macOS 12. So you can use the classes to scan micro QR codes or micro PDF codes, for example. Then the AV foundation classes can be set in a mode where they automatically detect barcodes in the camera feed. So whenever the camera sees a barcode, you get it as metadata. We have a class to play a loop of audio without pause. And if you use SceneKit for your 3D scenes, you can now include audio effects by playing music within the 3D space. So depending on where you are, the sound gets louder or less loud. And if you use WebKit for your HTML viewer on macOS, you can also get callbacks for downloading files. So the user can actually use your HTML viewer to download something. Then I started a new XML plugin, because why not? We have so much stuff replicated, so let's do our own XML classes. So they have a similar interface. They support Unicode very well and are quite fast. And over time, I hope to add more stuff there, so we can cover all the XML things. And recently, I started to add iterators, so we can loop over nodes. Like you can say, I have a big XML tree. Somewhere is a node named first name, and I want to loop over all the first name nodes in the whole XML document. And then it's just for each loop with a call to get the iterator for those nodes, and this makes coding very easy. So, and it can be used for all targets and platforms because, well, this is code which doesn't depend on any operation system. Then I have classes for MongoDB. A couple of customers asked for this over the years, and eventually I decided, oh, maybe a good idea. So you can connect to a MongoDB database natively in Xojo. You can pick a database, then you can pick a collection, which is the name in MongoDB for table. And then you can add, update, delete records, and all the records are passed as JSON. So when the plugin is moving the data over the network, it's binary JSON, so it's encoded more efficiently. But to you as a developer, we pass JSON. You can find documents, like you can find records. You can aggregate data, like you can ask the plugin to find all the values for a field and then get it as a list. You can run custom commands, like for example a ping or whatever other command you like, because you can pass a JSON with all the parameters, so you can use the full interface of the database server. And this works on all the targets and platforms, so you can use it from your iOS app or from your web app or from your desktop app, or even console app, of course. Then, while we are replicating things, we replicated another set of regular expression classes. So the plugin now has regular expression, the old library. This is the new library. We also have the classes for Mac. And if we want, we could also implement the one from Microsoft. But PCRE2 had the nice thing that it's very fast because it has a just-in-time compiler. And the just-in-time compiler allows us to compile native code within your application for both Intel and ARM and run it. So instead of running an interpreter, we can run compiled code, and that's, of course, faster. We also got iterators, so you can loop over the results, and yeah, makes coding a little bit easier. And if you like, you can even store and load the compiled pattern. So if you want to build a library of regular expression things, you could store them pre-compiled. Then I worked on Windows for ARM. So all plugins currently are built for Windows with ARM support. But the shard director one doesn't work yet because I'm still waiting for the library. But otherwise, all the other things like DynaPDF, SQL plugin, they all include the ARM libraries, so you can use them. It's now a good time to look for issues in both Xojo and the plugins, because we expect that more and more people will use Windows on ARM over the next years, and now we like to fix all the issues now before a lot of people use them. And I do my testing, for example, with Windows 11 in a virtual machine here on my MacBook, so I can try everything on the go, and so far it's working fantastic. Then Linux also does 64-bit ARM, and I built all the plugins for that too. And this includes, of course, Scintilla, SHA-Director, libxl, and DynaPDF, so you can use all our plugin functions on your Raspberry Pi or on your virtual machine on your MacBook. And yeah, well, just enjoy Linux. It's very efficient there. So then we have curl, another library from the open source community, which we use for all the HTTP, FTP, SFTP transfers and sending and receiving emails. Recently, we added WebSockets there. So you can connect to a server with WebSockets, send and receive data, and just communicate with WebSockets. The trick here is to connect with the option to. So we have the possibility with curl to just make a regular transfer, like a download with FTP, but we can also say connect only. So curl would only do the connection part, and then we would be on our own to send and receive data. And option connect only to is to set up a WebSocket. And then you use the WebSocket receive and send methods, and this is supported on all the platforms, including Windows ARM and Linux ARM. Yeah. And curl recently got new functions to query the list of protocols and features as string, because they used to have a bit mask, but they are running out of bits. So with adding more and more features, they have now to make a list of strings to identify the available protocols and features. And in the last weeks, I also worked on curl multi-interface. This allows you to run several transfers in parallel efficiently. And to make it a little bit easier for you, we got new methods to taking a delegate. So you can just build your curl object, then tell the curl multi-interface to just add it to the queue, then get a delegate called, so a call to your method when the transfer is finished. So it's like you can just run 100, you can set up 100 transfers, just add them all to the queue, and then later you get the callback and you don't need to manage anything. It's a nice addition. And over the last year, I wrote a new set of classes for Windows Bluetooth LA. So we had some classes, but Microsoft has more than one API. So I decided to try the newer one here. This one has the advantage that it has a watcher class, so you can watch for any Bluetooth LE devices coming by to your machine, and then you can connect to them and send and receive data. While I'm working on the new things on Windows, I also found that Microsoft ships an OCR engine with a plugin, with the Windows version. Since Windows 10, there's an OCR engine. It supports several languages. If you need to add a language, just go to your user settings, add a new language for Windows, and it downloads the OCR stuff. So you have built-in OCR into Windows, and we can just use it. Also, we discovered that Microsoft actually ships a little thing for PDF. So since Windows 10, they include classes to do PDF previews. So I have a few classes in the plugin now to synchronously or asynchronously load a PDF document from either a file or a string or memory block. Then you can query the sizes of the pages and how many pages you have, and you can render preview pictures for every page. And we have this nice example here. And this example exists now, I think, for PDFKit on Mac, for DynaPDF cross-platform, and for Windows PDF. And we got more things. So we have store classes for Windows to do in-app purchases on Windows. And I recently rewrote them and added a couple of more options there. So if you have anything on sale on Windows, you can use the Microsoft Store and use in-app purchases. We got the watch example. Yeah. We have classes to run JavaScript. And we have two sets of classes. So one is using duct tape to run JavaScript on Mac, Windows, Linux without an HTML viewer. The other thing is using JavaScript Core, which is the JavaScript engine for WebKit. And you could only run it on Mac and iOS. And recently, I added code to load JavaScript Core DLL on Windows, as well as a shared library on Linux. So you can run JavaScript code this way on all platforms. And the JavaScript Core class is a little bit newer than the duct tape engine. So if you have any need to run JavaScript without a HTML viewer, you should try it. And we have classes for running Java. And I recently updated them to work with Java 19 and version 20. So little changes are needed from time to time, but otherwise the Java code was there for over 10 years now, I think. So then people always ask, what's next? Well, I don't know. You tell me. So there are probably new macOS and iOS features coming with Apple's developer conference. I will probably dig more into the Windows classes from Microsoft to find other things, like I found OCR and PDF and the Windows Store classes, and we find more. Eventually, we may have something for Android. I don't know. Depends. I recently also discovered how I can use Swift code within my plugins. So Apple has this programming language called Swift, and newer frameworks from Apple are nowadays Swift only. So there is no C or Objective-C interface. So I have to use Swift when I want to use them. I can embed the Swift code into a normal plugin file, but this requires the macOS, I think it was 11, or iOS 15 or something. So you have to have a new operation system where the Swift libraries are included with the operation system, so the application doesn't need to bring it. And then I can include Swift code in the library, and we will see what new frameworks Apple brings that may be interesting to include in the plugin. One request I got several times is StoreKit 2. So Apple has the older StoreKit framework, which I include in the plugins to make your in-app purchases on Mac and iOS. They also have the StoreKit 2 framework, which provides a few more options for subscription, for refunding, for order tracking, and we may add more there. And of course, as always, I'm just working for the community. So if you have any wishes, you can send them to me, and yeah, we may consider them. If you like to buy something, there's a coupon code. I will later check that it's on. And if you need any license, you can get 20% off if you order in the next weeks. And with that, we come to questions and answers. We have a question.
Excuse me. You've got a Word file add-on there you mentioned. Can you use that to load the document and save it as a PDF?
The question is whether we can convert from Word to PDF, and the answer is no. The trick I usually use is to install LibreOffice and then run a command line tool in LibreOffice to have it load the Word document, do all the formatting and page layout things, and then output a PDF. So you find somewhere, I think in the examples or in the blog, I have this as I have a blog article about that, I think. Do you have other questions? Yeah?
Very, very basic question. Do you, with the different versions of Xojo, do I need to sort of match the version of the MBS plugin to the version of Xojo?
No.
No. Okay.
No. So the question is whether you have to match plugin version to the Xojo version. And basically, you can take the current plugin version and use it for all your older versions of Xojo, because we basically support something like Real Studio or Real Basic 2006 R4. That was when 64-bit integer was introduced, and everything newer. But recently on macOS, I skipped including 32-bit libraries. So on Mac, you need 2017 R3 and newer nowadays. But otherwise, yeah.
So how do you suggest we implement the plugins? Drag them all into our plugin folder? Or drag in just the ones we need? Or, because it seems like, you know, you drag them all in, it takes a long time to open Xojo. The first compile after you launch takes a long time. So how do you suggest we manage that?
So the question is how to manage the plugins, whether to install them all. And I don't do that. You can, of course, if you're playing with examples, of course, throw them in all, play with examples. But if you have your projects, you usually should reduce to the number of plugins you need. Maybe you can just live with 5 or 10 plugins. And then Xojo is a little bit faster. And we have on the documentation a page about dependencies, because some plugins need other plugins.
There's software called Plugins Pro, which is free from Strawberry Software. They're on the forum. Tim Parnell, I think, does it. And with that, you just dump across all of your plugins, but only the ones that you've got checked in Plugins Pro will actually be installed.
So David suggests to use a Plugin Pro application to manage your plugins.
Plugins Pro, search for it on the forum, Strawberry Software.
It can also, the plugins are shipped as zip files, basically, and this software can also unpack them, which makes the loading a little bit faster too. Any other questions?
You mentioned the Windows PDF previewing in the for Windows. If you're running a web application on a Windows server, can you use that plugin to render a PDF and display it in a browser?
So the question is whether you can use the Windows PDF classes in a web app on a Windows server, and the answer is yes. You can render a JPEG from your PDF page and then show the JPEG in your web app. More questions? So if someone is in need of a little pocket knife or a pen, I have a few of them to give away. Oh, there's another question.
Just one thing, I'd like to say that you bailed me out numerous times. And without some of your plugins, I would be in big trouble, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other question?
Kristen is very helpful if you can catch him online in the chat, and he's answered my stupid questions.
Yeah.
So it's also a question, something you didn't say is that now that you have a Google AdMob plugin for iOS, that is one of the best ways to generate revenue with a free app.
Yeah, well.
Just so everyone knows, if you make an iOS app which is free, and you don't want to go into the hassle of doing in-app purchases, you can implement Christian's plugins with display ads, and that works really well.
Yeah, so if anyone needs to make money, we have in-app purchases for Mac, for Windows, and we have the ads for iOS, and the in-app purchase for iOS too. So.
For Mac.
The StoreKit classes are for Mac and iOS. For Windows, we have separate classes, and we have the AdMob for iOS. So any other question? Okay, then thank you, and talk to you soon.